Women's rights are human rights. They are a matter of equality, of diversity, and they concern nations, communities, international relations. They are relevant to markets, to families, to health. They are related to every little aspect of our lives, including love and sadly also violence. We, the legal profession, or me as a lawyer, I have committed myself to advancing the rule of law, and therefore I strongly fight to advance the rights of women. This is why I'm here to share what we've been doing in order to promote, raise awareness and advance the rights of women. The Fernando Pombo Foundation that I run and created now has more than 10 years of experience and has been devoted to advancing the rights of the more vulnerable, always through the law and through the legal profession. So how do we do it? We advance our cause through the elimination of legal barriers, through research, through partnerships, and creating awareness and training. All of this is really focused and together with the legal profession. This is our angle, our focus, and our strength. One of the projects with victims of gender-based violence, and specifically teenagers, is related to digital violence. We created this project, which is right now about to finish, in order to see how we could prevent digital violence and how we could bring offenders to justice. One of the challenges was how to make victims aware of the fact that what they were going through was actually gender-based violence. Another challenge was to see how to make the offenders stop doing this violence or abusing their victims. A third challenge was gathering evidence, which was not so clear before because of all the digital technologies. It hadn't been so clear for all the victims and their legal advisors to see how the evidence had to be put before the courts. A fourth challenge was how to make the perpetrator remove specific sensitive materials from online circles or from social media. That was another challenge. So in this project, what we did, and now it's just only on its final stage, was to generate and gather a big group of experts, all pro bono lawyers. We also had some lawyers from the general forces, securities and forces who are specialized in gender-based violence, some judges who are dealing with victims, some lawyers from NGOs assisting victims, and we also had lawyers from law firms who are specialized in technology law. We had lawyers specialized in litigation. So we had different lawyers, a very varied group of pro bono lawyers, each of them deploying their core skills into this concrete area. The guide has resulted in an extremely practical work which helps not only the victims but also their families and the social workers that relate with, it's mostly oriented towards teenagers, but also other women who operate in social media. And this was a matter that developed hugely during the pandemic because most of social relations were done through social media. During the pandemic, Spanish government passed a very welcome law, which for the first time gave unemployment benefits to household workers. This was something, I think this is something we have to celebrate. Now, however, let me get into the details because not everything has been as wonderful as we had hoped for. But the reality is that during the pandemic, this law was passed, and it was passed specifically because with the economic recession and all the unemployment that was happening, lots of household workers were being fired, and also lots of employers were dying, old people who were being taken care by household workers. And so with this new law, they could have access to some benefits. The reality is that still today, many of them have not received a euro. But I think although we may have had some bureaucracy inefficiency in the application of the law, I think we should celebrate that this has happened, and this could be the beginning of a new trend in employment law in connection with household workers. So when this law was passed in connection with household workers, what we did was, in connection and in collaboration with social entities assisting recently unemployed household workers, we did a sort of an ABC of said law, so that these unemployed workers could actually go and ask for the benefits. Debts generate exclusion, and there are many forms of violence, including economical violence. Through the years of working with vulnerable and excluded, marginalized women, we realized that one of the problems they encountered to access their rights was that they had debts. The lack of economical resources was the origin of the problem in then accessing other rights. Then in connection and in a partnership with a social entity, we could try to use a law which was not intended for extremely excluded women, but who might benefit them. This is called personal bankruptcy law, and this is intended for small entrepreneurs who suddenly go bankrupt. We realized that working with prostitutes who had been victims of trafficking, and who had gone out of the traffic horror, a few years after, they would go back to prostitution because they had debts. That is one example. Another example was a homeless woman who ended up on the street because of debts. So in this context with this woman, we analyzed the law, this bankruptcy law for individuals, to see whether they could apply to this law. And we realized there was a possibility through the law to actually for them to apply to it. Obviously the law was not intended for them. And again, here what we did was a translation into plain Spanish, and we made it very simple because I don't know how many of you are familiar with the bankruptcy law, but it's horrifically complicated. And so we tried to explain in simple words, what were the circumstances where those women could actually even think of applying to the law. This is now still ongoing. The legislation needs some improvement. We're working together with the different cases and seeing where the loopholes are. And in the possible law reforms, we will try to work together with the government to see where the situation of this extremely vulnerable woman could be taken into account when the law is amended. Victims of human trafficking suffer massive violations of their rights. and as such, we have devoted enormous resources and energies into putting a program where we could try to advance their rights and try to raise awareness in the legal world so that we can stand by the victims and try to change their reality. In this context, we have united forces with Association Drave, and we have created a program, a 3-year program, with 2 clear objectives. One is to try to have governmental and non-governmental anti-trafficking relevant stakeholders to implement all the legislations and operational policies in accordance with international and European standards. This may seem very basic, but today it's still not happening. The second objective is to have the Spanish legislative framework have an effective operations whereby the victims can actually access their rights. Those are the 2 main goals that we have with this project. What are the challenges right now? The challenges are 5. Victims have problems accessing their rights. There is a non-existent existence of victim-center-based approach to everything related to anti-trafficking. Also, the law in anti-human trafficking in Spain is being drafted right now, and the administrations are not doing a proactive and effective approach to anti-trafficking. And finally, legal operators don't know enough of the reality of the victims. We have interviewed victims, we've interviewed different communities in different regions of Spain because they have different policies, different approaches. We have analyzed the way that different courts are actually acting with victims. We are working with legal clinics, we're working with pro bono lawyers, and we are doing a lot of research also on good practices internationally on business against human trafficking, so that we may learn from what is being done abroad and bring those good practices back into Spain. We have identified already several massive legal obstacles, and we are now trying to produce this guide on good practices on how to advance, train, and raise awareness to legal operators. When we talk about women's rights, we tend to think of those who suffer most and those who are in the worst positions, who are poor or disadvantaged, or who suffer disabilities, or who may be in the worst thinkable position. However, as a lawyer and working on a foundation of lawyers, there's another angle of women's rights that we have been analyzing, studying, and also we hope to influence somehow. And this is the position of women lawyers in the legal profession. Obviously, this is a matter that has generated lots of research and lots of articles in the press and books and everything. The famous glass ceiling in law firms, whereby still not enough equality is shown on numbers across the globe. Trends are improving, but still very slowly and not good enough. I hope altogether we can change the situation. We can make the legal profession a more inclusive, a more diverse, a more rights-aware environment, where we can all work realizing that diversity is profitable. Women are at the heart of societies, of organizations, of nations, of communities. They work at the background, at the forefront, always there. And however, they are not always recognized for it. Therefore, we need to see how we can, hopefully through this event and many others, try to raise awareness of the reality of women and how we can push for equality in order to make women's rights a reality. All together, let's fight for equality. Let's fight for women's rights. Let's do it.